what do you foresee, prognosticate will be interesting with regard to FOSS and AI in 2024?
That's an excellent question. When it comes to 2024, like a thing that came up at a community call yesterday morning was there was a project team call earlier that day that someone brought up on the community meeting saying that there was this AI bot on the meeting and like, what is that? Is that part of the conference tool? Why was it there? What are people doing with, what we said on that call? And it made people very uncomfortable.
Huh.
So that is something that I have on my plate to sort out. But at the same time, it's just again the next step of that AI being used and AI interacting with projects. So that is something that the community is now talking about in terms of like harmful ways of using an AI bot and an AI assistant, as well as the good ways of using it, because people with like hearing disabilities, for instance,
Mhm.
they can get a lot of use out of an AI bot who just listens to the meeting, writes up a transcript, a summary. So like, from their perspective, it is a huge help. But at the same time, it's also very easy to use that AI bot in a harmful way.
Yep.
And that is something that, again, communities will need to more directly discuss and address and come up with their own policies in terms of what they are comfortable with and how to prevent things from happening that are not good for the community, individuals, the ecosystem at large. And another example that we've been also experiencing in our communities is people posting responses to the mailing list to questions, and you can tell that the responses were generated by AI, and often they are either not useful, or if it's like a deployment type of question, then the AI might have got it right, but it might not have. And then if you're responding to a question with something that actually doesn't work and it appears like it's something that you've already done, so the person who reads the response trusts that it will work and then it messes
Mhm.
up their system, then it does more harm than good. So that's another way of, again, AI interaction that doesn't touch the code, but it affects the community's communication to a large extent. So I kind of see 2024 as the year when we start to be more strategic and mindful about AI. And now that we are kind of past that shock of 2023, AI just buzzed in to the year and then everybody's disrupted. Now we know it exists. We have a level of understanding of how it is currently used. So I think this will be the year when we start to not just be more strategic, but also be more efficient and effective with AI, but it will take a lot of work. How
Yeah,
do you see it?
it's interesting. You talk about basically that's disinformation, right? If you've got bots answering that seem like it's legitimate, but it's not, um, you know, humans don't typically do that, or if you do, they have a reputation of not being very good at providing feedback. So it's taken in that sense, right? But when you have a lot of different artificial actors out there, how do you actually know? I mean, that was one of the interesting things that I found in one of the community calls we had in OpenStack, which was the maintainers talking about how they were concerned with what they were seeing, that they were needing to review AI generated code that in many cases wasn't very good. Um, and that was concerning to them, right? And so having a mindset change of the developer community, that if you're going to be leveraging AI to write substantial portions of your code, as opposed to, just doing, sentence completion type of stuff. If you're going to do more logic type of creation in AI, then your job becomes a reviewer instead of a developer. So before you pass this off to anybody else to review, you should review it and make sure that it meets your quality control, because you're going to be measured on it, from what that AI bot is going to be generating. I found that to be an interesting, an important perspective, right? The developers actually, by definition, have to become better reviewers, because they're going to have to start reviewing this code that's generated not by them. And I think that in 2024, we'll see legal discussions on that in particular. Cases like the New York Times bringing forward their topic of, you can't do this, and you can't have that large language model spit out something that is extremely close to the original work. That'll, whatever gets decided there will have an implication on software, and on open source in particular, because that's the vast majority of the corpus of code from which these various large language models learn how to code, is from all of that open source that's really available. So, what happens in the literary world will impact what happens in the software world. And so that will be interesting to see. I think we're also to a point where folks are starting to recognize that, there's not going to be a handful or even a few dozen large language models that do everything for everybody. There's going to be a gazillion smaller or more purpose-built tools around AI, but they'll probably all start with a foundational model. So if you look at that as a construct, I think having something that is open source as those foundational models, and as you say, it's both the tools, the input tools to build the model, it's the translation mechanisms for being able to transpose from one model to another or synthesize two models. There's a lot of tools around these that are going to be built. And then, of course, you've got the data. Is that open or not? Those are all questions that we need to figure out, at least from the foundational standpoint. And then, just like in open source, right, y'all build the foundations together, and then you differentiate on your very specific things. I think that there's an analogy there for what happens with language models or with generative AI models in general. It doesn't have to be large language. But having foundational models that are common, and then or purpose-built ones that sit on top of that and leverage that foundation model, but are purpose-built for something specific. I think there's very much a place for open source in that. And I think if the ecosystem is to thrive, then that needs to end up manifesting. I think I'd also go out on a limb and say that in 2024, we're going to start to see AI-based computer languages, where it's the code that you're writing is more of an intent-based, as opposed to a specific, how do you write a for loop kind of based, right? So if you think about what we did from assembler to higher level languages, I think we can now very much make a jump from higher level languages to something that's more intent based. And by that, it will also end up being more dialogue based, right? Meaning, I want you to, write me a program that does this, and the actual software, the compiler, comes back and says, well, now I could do this in this way or that way or the other way. Which way did you mean? And what would be your preference? And what should take priority? And so it's actually a dialogue between the compiler and the developer. And then you end up with a set of code, or you end up with an application. You end up with something that does something for you. I expect we'll see things like that. I think there's going to be another order of abstraction that happens with computer languages. And so then if you think about that, what would be open source? Would it be the dialogue? Would it be what you actually said to the compiler and how you responded to its prompts? Is that then what's shared, because that can be then repeated by entering another? Or would it be the actual output? I'm thinking it's probably not the output, because that's still going to be very static. Whereas the dialogue can have, much more nuance. Well, the original said this, but I actually wanted to do that, or that's the 10% you're adding in open source, right? So that kind of model, and what does open source mean when we have higher level languages? I think we're going to start seeing that 2024, and that makes me excited for the future. Right, I'm curious to see how that works out and what that looks like. It also opens up coding to a lot more people, because when you don't have to know what a for loop is and what a sparse matrix is and all of those other lovely things that you learned in computer science courses, and it's more intent based, I think it opens it up for a lot more people. So I'm kind of looking forward to that, and I expect to start to see artificial intelligence based computer languages start to show up in 2024.
I think it will be exciting when it happens. Whether it's 2024 or 2025, we will see. And that might be when I get back into coding. I still know what a what a for loop is, but I haven't written one in a long time. It will definitely be nice to have that, and then just like looking at how AI and technology just changes a lot of people's lives, even those
Yeah.
who had not much to do with technology before. So it will be a very interesting era to see and live through. So that part excites me too.